The band's relationship with Nile Rodgers was respectful and productive. Nile pushed them to be tighter, more rhythmically precise than they might have been otherwise. He demanded multiple takes and attention to detail. Some band members found this challenging, but they also recognized it made them better musicians. The discipline Nile instilled in those sessions served INXS well throughout their career. For fans discovering INXS through later hits like Need You Tonight or Never Tear Us Apart, going back and listening to Original Sin provides important context. It shows where the band was heading stylistically before they fully arrived with Kick. It demonstrates Michael's willingness to address serious themes, and it proves that INXS's success wasn't accidental or manufactured. They'd been building toward it, taking risks, developing their sound. The song's legacy extends beyond INXS's discography. Original Sin influenced other Australian bands trying to break internationally. It showed that being from Australia wasn't a limitation if you were willing to work with the right producers and create music with universal appeal. Bands like Midnight Oil and Men at Work benefited from the doors INXS helped open with songs like Original Sin. Michael never backed away from the message of Original Sin throughout his life. In interviews years later, he'd reference it as one of the INXS songs he was most proud of. Not because it was a massive hit, but because it stood for something, because it said something that needed to be said. That pride in the song's message speaks to Michael's character and values. The controversy surrounding Original Sin seems quaint now in some ways. The idea that showing interracial romance in a music video would be scandalous feels like ancient history. But that's partly because artists like INXS pushed boundaries and normalized what had been controversial. Progress happens because people are willing to take risks and face backlash. Michael and INXS did that with Original Sin. If you listen to the song today, what strikes you is how good it is musically, apart from the message. Nile Rodgers' production holds up. The groove is infectious. Michael's vocal is confident and passionate. Daryl Hall's contributions are perfectly integrated. It's a great song that happens to also have an important message, rather than a message song that happens to be listenable. That balance is difficult to achieve, but Original Sin nails it. Original Sin represents INXS at a pivotal moment. They were transitioning from regional success to international ambition. They were finding their voice, both musically and thematically. They were establishing themselves as artists willing to take stands and risks. The song itself might not be as famous as Need You Tonight or Never Tear Us Apart, but it's just as important to understanding who INXS was and what they stood for. 40 years after its release, Original Sin remains relevant. Racism and prejudice haven't disappeared. The message of the song, that love transcends racial boundaries and that we should wake up to a brand new day free from those prejudices, is still needed. Michael Hutchinson's willingness to use his platform to advocate for that message in 1984 was courageous. And the song stands as a testament to what rock music can be when artists care about more than just commercial success.
South African radio banned Original Sin outright during the Apartheid era. The government controlled media at that time, and anything promoting racial integration was forbidden. The song and video were completely censored. Some American radio stations, particularly in more conservative regions, also declined to play it. They'd cite controversial content or not fitting their format, but everyone knew the real reason. The interracial themes made them uncomfortable. But the controversy helped as much as it hurt. Music journalists and critics praised INXS for taking a stand. Progressive radio stations played it heavily as a statement of support for the message. Young audiences who were tired of bland, safe pop music gravitated to it precisely because it was controversial. Original Sin became INXS's first song to chart internationally in a significant way. It didn't go number one, but it cracked the top 40 in multiple countries and got the band noticed beyond Australia. Michael's performance of Original Sin in concerts became a powerful moment. He'd often give a brief introduction explaining what the song was about, making it clear this wasn't just entertainment, but a statement of values. Audiences responded enthusiastically. There's footage from concerts in the mid-'80s where you can see diverse crowds singing along to Dream On White Boy, Dream On Black Girl, and it's genuinely moving. Music bringing people together across racial lines, which is exactly what Michael intended. The band faced some backlash, particularly when they toured in areas where the song's message wasn't welcome. There were protests at some shows. Conservative groups would picket outside venues, but INXS and Michael specifically refused to back down or apologize. Michael would say in interviews that if people were offended by the message of original sin, that was their problem, not his. He wasn't going to compromise on issues of basic human equality and dignity. Nile Rodgers later reflected on Original Sin as one of his favorite productions. He appreciated that INXS was willing to make a bold statement rather than play it safe. Nile himself had experienced racism in the music industry and personally, so the song's message resonated with him deeply. The collaboration between Nile and INXS on Original Sin proved that artistic partnership could create something more meaningful than either party might accomplish alone. The success of Original Sin opened doors for INXS internationally. American record labels and radio stations who might have ignored them before now paid attention. European markets became accessible. The song proved INXS could compete on the world stage, not just in Australia. And importantly, it established them as a band with substance, not just another disposable pop act. They had something to say. The Swing album, which featured Original Sin as its lead single, was released in April 1984. It was INXS's fourth studio album, but their first with truly international ambitions. The album did well commercially, going platinum in Australia and gold in several other countries, but more than sales, it represented a turning point in INXS's artistic identity. They were no longer just a pub rock band from Australia. They were artists willing to tackle important themes and take creative risks. Michael's evolution as a lyricist is evident when you compare Original Sin to his earlier work. His first attempts at songwriting for INXS were more straightforward, focused on relationships and rock and roll cliches. But by Original Sin, he was thinking bigger, considering social issues, trying to use his platform for something beyond entertainment. This maturation would continue throughout his career, culminating in some of his most personal and profound lyrics in the 90s. The influence of Original Sin on INXS's later work should not be underestimated. It showed them that combining funk and rock could create something commercially viable and artistically interesting. That lesson would pay off massively with Kick 3 years later, when songs like Need You Tonight would perfect the funk-rock fusion that Original Sin pioneered for the band. Nile Rodgers planted seeds in 1984 that bore fruit in 1987.
1984. INXS is in the studio with Nile Rodgers, the legendary producer behind Chic's Le Freak and David Bowie's Let's Dance. They're recording a song called Original Sin, and they know it's going to cause problems. The lyrics deal with interracial love. The music video will show Michael Hutchence in intimate scenes with women of different races. And in 1984, that's still controversial enough to get you banned in some parts of the world. South African radio will refuse to play it during Apartheid. Some American stations won't touch it. Conservative groups will protest. But INXS doesn't back down. They release Original Sin anyway, with Daryl Hall from Hall & Oates on backing vocals, and it becomes their first international breakthrough hit. Not despite the controversy, but partly because of it. This is the story of the song that showed INXS had substance, the track that proved they weren't just another pretty boy band, and the moment when Michael Hutchence established himself as an artist willing to take risks for what he believed in. Let me take you back to early 1984, because understanding where INXS was at this point in their career matters. They'd had some success in Australia with their first few albums. They were a good live band, building a following in the pub rock circuit. But they hadn't broken through internationally. They hadn't found the sound or the song that would make people outside Australia pay attention. Their record label was getting impatient. They needed something bigger, something bolder. And that's where Nile Rodgers came in. Nile Rodgers wasn't just any producer. He'd created some of the biggest disco and funk hits of the late 70s and early 80s with Chic, songs like Good Times and Le Freak that defined an era.
He'd then successfully transitioned into rock production with David Bowie's Let's Dance in 1983, which became one of Bowie's biggest commercial successes. Nile brought a funk sensibility, a groove-oriented approach that was different from traditional rock production, and INXS, with their background in Australian pub rock, but also their love of funk and R&B, seemed like a perfect match for him. The band met Nile through their management and label connections. There was mutual interest. Nile liked INXS's energy and thought he could help them find a more international sound. The band was excited to work with someone of Nile's caliber, someone who'd worked with heroes like Bowie and Chic. They agreed to record what would become the Swing album, with Nile producing, and one of the first songs they worked on together was Original Sin. The title Original Sin is loaded with meaning. In Christian theology, original sin is the doctrine that humanity is born into a fallen state because of Adam and Eve's disobedience in the Garden of Eden. But the song uses that concept as a metaphor for racism and prejudice. The original sin the song addresses is the sin of judging people based on skin color, of allowing race to divide humanity. The lyrics are direct about this theme. Dream on, white boy, dream on, black girl, and wake up to a brand new day. It's a call for unity across racial lines, for love that transcends the artificial boundaries society creates. Michael's lyrics for Original Sin were more overtly political and socially conscious than anything INXS had done before. The band had generally stayed away from political statements in their music, focusing instead on personal relationships and rock and roll themes. But Original Sin was different. Michael felt strongly about racism and wanted to use INXS's platform to say something meaningful about it. The early 80s were still a time when interracial relationships faced significant prejudice in many parts of the world. Apartheid was still the law in South Africa. Racial tension was high in many countries. Michael wanted to address that. Nile Rodgers' production on Original Sin was distinctive. He brought in that funky, groove-based approach he was known for. The bass line is prominent and driving. The rhythm is dance-oriented. There are brass sections and backing vocals that give it an R&B feel. It doesn't sound like typical rock music of the mid-80s. It sounds like funk rock fusion, something that would appeal to both rock fans and dance and R&B audiences. Nile was deliberately trying to make INXS sound more international, more radio-friendly across different formats. One of the most interesting aspects of the recording was getting Daryl Hall from Hall & Oates on backing vocals. Daryl Hall was huge at the time. Hall & Oates were one of the biggest pop acts in the world, with hits like Man-Eater and I Can't Go For That. Getting Daryl on the track gave Original Sin instant credibility and star power. His blue-eyed soul vocals complemented Michael's rock voice perfectly. The combination created a sound that was unique and immediately attention-grabbing. The music video for Original Sin was where the controversy really intensified. Directed by Richard Lowenstein, who would go on to direct most of INXS's iconic videos, it featured Michael in various scenes with women of different ethnic backgrounds, not just standing near them, but in intimate, romantic contexts, kissing, embracing, clearly meant to represent interracial relationships. For 1984, this was provocative imagery. MTV in America aired it, which was progressive for the time, but many other outlets refused.